Hello and welcome. You are listening to The Hello You Show. I'm your host, Jessica Rice, and the founder of Jessica Rice Coaching. This show is for ambitious and visionary-minded women leaders and entrepreneurs ready to uplevel their impact and establish their personal brand and unique voice. It's time, ladies, to make our voices heard. Say hello again to the real you. Hello and welcome to the Hello You Show. My name is Jessica Rice and I am your host for today's show, and I am so excited to share. We have a special guest on our show today, Heidi Low, who is an amazing woman who has experienced some amazing and difficult experiences within her life, who started Ohana Oasis, which is a nonprofit that serves bereaved parents nationwide with week-long retreats, as well as regionally across the United States for leadership training programs and cohorts that are even fully supported by trained leaders. Heidi has this incredible story that I can't wait for her to share with you of grief and trauma and resilience and overcoming that I think will be incredibly inspiring and uplifting and encouraging for all of us who have experienced anything in our lives that's been challenging. So, Heidi, I want to bring you on. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Hello You Show. I so appreciate you coming on and sharing with us today. I'd love if you'd be willing just to share with us a little bit more about your story so that everyone can understand what brought you here and how you got here today.
You bet. And thank you so much for having me. I know we've chatted some in the past, and just you and how you operate really resonated with me. So I feel honored to be here with you today and be talking with your guests or with your listeners. So almost 20 years ago now, I'd been married for going on 6 years, had 3 stepchildren, and then my husband and I had my one biological child, Allison. And just shy of her 3rd birthday, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor and died almost exactly 2 years after that. Which that whole journey, I'm like giving you the high level cliff notes so we can dig deeper into anything that you want to, but just like that broad overview, even going through the treatment and everything was difficult. All 3 of the stepkids also, or I should say my bonus children, because they're still in my lives and I love them dearly. They all lived with us. So going through that, and then her death, and then a month later, our marriage fell apart. So I went from stay-at-home mom with 4 children, and one of them being terminally ill, and I was taking one college class at the time, trying to get through, to single working girl going to school full-time, working full-time, and creating a new life for myself within 2 months. So, yeah, it was a wild ride. Like I said, it was almost 20 years ago now. And, in hindsight, everybody was like, "Oh, you're so strong. How do you do it?" And I was like, I don't know. I just put one foot in front of the other. And while that's true, I can also look and say that it was a wild ride. There were some really, really difficult moments, and there were also some beautiful ones. And I would absolutely love my daughter to be here with me, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, besides that piece, but even that, I firmly believe that she was here for as long as she was supposed to be here. So I'm just lucky I got to be her mom.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I know it's a deeply personal story, and I'm just amazed at your courage and ability to work through that, even though I know it took some time to kind of go from, when it occurred and then to where you are now. So I'd love to hear, what was this kind of driving force that kind of kept you moving forward, and ultimately how you came up with creating Ohana Oasis?
Yeah. So I would say in the beginning, survival was my driving thing. And I did have a baseline, and this is where almost I think it was a gift that absolutely everything fell apart because I knew right away that I was building a whole new life for myself and that I didn't want to be defined as a divorcee. I didn't want to be defined as a bereaved parent. I wanted those experiences to refine me and to be able to look back at them and say, these horrific, horrendous things were a catalyst for growth, and that I am in a better place than I ever could have been before them. So it took me on a journey of a lot of growth and a lot of self reflection and a lot of pushing myself beyond my comfort level. And I don't regret it for a single moment. It definitely was what has brought me to where I am today, 20 years later. And even with that, like, I'm still in new iterations. It never ends. Um, but I would say that that journey that I went on, it was about 4 or 5 years into it. I started thinking, the first couple of years were an absolute blur. Like you could ask me something about them, and I probably would have not have an answer
Mhm.
because it just was. But around year 4 or 5, I really started thinking, I know I have more of something in me, and I like by that time I had graduated. I actually had my dream career. I had gotten hired on as an in-house government relations director for Cancer Society, so I was lobbying for the good guys for cancer, and my daughter had died of a brain tumor, so like it all felt like it like made sense, and yet there was something missing, and I kept looking for it. And then I finally gave up on looking for what that was and figured, you know what, it'll come to me at some point. And then 8 years in, I had this pivotal aha moment, which I can go to the story if you want to, but where I was like, oh my gosh, I want to be doing something different than what I'm doing. And at that time was able to like really sink into envisioning what it was that if I had it all my way and there were no barriers, what would I be doing? And I realized I wanted to be providing retreats for other bereaved parents, offering them the resources and the tools and the safety and all the things that I had in my growth process. And I will say that whether it's because of just how I am naturally or based on my decision that I didn't want to be defined by my experiences, a lot of the tools and the resources that I used were not grief focused. They were more growth focused, if that makes sense,
Mhm.
looking more holistically. And so from that, I had that moment. And then I looked and said, okay, well, what are the external barriers? How do I remove them? Are they removable? Fast forward a year and a half, and I was living on a tropical island, standing in front of a balloon arch, listening to the tires of the cars of the parents come up for their retreat and thinking, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? I have these people for a week. I don't know them. They don't know me. And um, it was a wild ride, and including a main water line break in the house right before dinner one night.
Oh no.
So we ended up getting moved to another house overnight, going out to dinner, which then translated into every other retreat after that. We do a dinner out one night. Uh, but we got through all of that, even though it wasn't exactly how I planned it. And it had its share of snafus. 3 weeks later, we had 45 people on the waiting list. So it worked. It resonated. And that was the beginning of a whole new career trajectory. What started out as like, I'm going to try this one retreat and see if I'm absolutely crazy, which I still might be absolutely crazy, but it worked. So now here I am over 10 years later and 15 plus retreats later. Um, we now have a leadership program that all of our alumni that have gone through retreats, they're the ones facilitating the retreats. Now, I don't facilitate their retreats. I facilitate the leaders facilitating the retreats.
Mm.
Um, and I'm now in the space of actually moving away from that and really handing it off to the folks that is still their passion that is like, because there's these parents that have gone through it and are in leadership, that like this is what they want to be doing full time. So kind of passing that off to them and moving into teaching other people how to do retreats for any kind of heart-centered thing, because I've seen how powerful they are. So I keep pivoting and I keep growing and keep following my passion, whatever it is.
Well, it's truly inspiring, I think, for all of us who've ever really thought about trying to do something more. And I love this, how you're saying that you're standing beneath this balloon arch and there's people driving up and then it's hitting you that this is really happening. And you put yourself into a path where you can make a huge difference. And that's scary, but it's also incredibly brave at the same time. And I just commend you for that bravery. I'm curious to know what gave you the courage to walk away? You've had a very established career. What gave you that courage to know, like, this is what I need to be doing and just to walk away? Because oftentimes we look at our career is our safety net. And so this idea of leaving, it's scary.
I think that it was a blessing and a curse that I was single. It was a blessing in that I didn't have to negotiate, a significant other's desires. It was a curse in that I didn't have a fallback. Um, but what gave me the courage was that I really had that aligned moment where it was me getting in touch with my internal voice, my highest self voice, like whatever, however you want to call it. It was like really getting in touch with it and being open to whatever was there. So in that moment, it almost felt divine, for lack of a better way of putting it, but it felt like beyond myself and my highest self. And so I was able to hold on to that at that moment, knowing that that was something to move forward with. And what ended up being executed was not completely, but was different than what I envisioned. But it was just that moment of clarity and truth and knowledge within. And then practically speaking, once I looked at the barriers, it was like, I own a house, I have all these friends, and I addressed each of them one by one. And a lot of them were like, okay, that's a difficult choice and I'm willing to make it. And the really big one was selling my house, because it was in the middle of like the bottom of the market, where houses weren't selling. I had bought it like at the tippy top of the market, and now we're at the bottom of the market. So I was like, okay, universe, you know what? This is the vision. This is the dream. If this is what I'm supposed to be doing, let's slap the house on the market and see if I can get what I got out of it. Like, I don't need to make money, but can I at least come out even? And put the house on the market on a Thursday and got a full price offer on that Sunday and walked away with $3,000 in cash at closing.
Wow.
So it was this. That's all to say that it was like this pairing of belief, and even though it was ridiculous and overwhelming and, oh my gosh, I'm going to pick up everything and move 3,000 miles away and I'm going to start this whole new career, it was a belief in something beyond myself. And like, I'm spiritual but not like religious, so I would just say a belief in something beyond myself and in myself, and that everything would come together if I just kept taking the steps. So it was like one small step at a time. Like, okay, I'm going to sell the house. Well, I didn't move to Kauai right away. I moved into a rental and took the next step of, okay, I'm going to quit my job so that I can start aligning and take on um, contracts so that I'm working for myself that provides the flexibility. So it was just each baby step and then watching another door or another window open. And they weren't always the ones that I was expecting, but they were the ones that were aligned and got me exactly where I needed to go.
That's so amazing. And I love that you kind of you kind of had a formula that you started to follow and incrementally make those shifts. I think oftentimes when we think about doing those things, it's in a blaze of glory because we're having a moment of, I just want out of here. I just want free.
Right.
So you mentioned a little bit earlier that you had this aha moment. I would love to hear, what was this aha moment that you had?
Yeah. So, like I said, I had played around with different ideas for several years. So, like, my somewhere in my brain and my body were like different ideas that just didn't resonate. So it was an aha moment where it all came together, but I would also say a lot of that work had been happening for several years before. So it's kind of like where all these little pieces all of a sudden fell into alignment, um, and into place. But it was a July afternoon. I was sitting on my back patio, and in the lobbying world, at least in Idaho where I was, July is like our very mellow season, like January to, depending on when session ends that year, till maybe May. Like you are working all hours, you have no life. But in the summer is when you get to relax. And so, like, I was working kind of on my back patio, and a fellow lobbyist that works somewhere else, he was a really good friend and colleague of mine. And we had talked about, like, we want something different, but we didn't know what it was. He texted me and he's like, "That's it, I'm out of here." And I just got so insanely jealous. And it wasn't because of what he was doing. Like, I was aware enough to realize that. And I thought, well, what am I picturing myself doing? Because here I am with my dream career, even down to, like, I'm wearing the fun clothes and dressing up in suits and heels. And I've got the friends that we're all in this, like, group of movers and shakers within politics. Like, I have all these external things that I thought that I wanted, even working for an organization that I loved. Um, but it wasn't cutting it. And so when I had that moment of saying, what am I jealous of and why am I not fulfilled, then to, like, have that, I don't know, whatever insight to then say, okay, well, what am I picturing?
And I think that's so true. Like sometimes we do see it's not out of jealousy of what someone else is experiencing, but because we want it, and it almost is kind of the fire underneath us to go along with them, so we're not feeling left behind, almost to a certain extent. Um,
Yeah. I think that it's always, whenever, at least for me, whenever I have jealousy or envy, it's like, okay, slap up the mirror. What is it about me? Because it's not ever really about the other person.
mhm, mhm. Which is such a good point to recognize when we see that and how we internalize that, so we can recognize and understand what does it mean for us, and how do we turn that into something positive for ourselves so that we can move forward and be living in that integrity that we're hoping to have.
For sure. Because I think that if you don't do that and get honest with yourself, you're going to get jealous again. You're going to get envious again. And it's like going to keep coming until you actually come to that realization. And then you can make a real decision of, like, okay, well, maybe I'm not going to follow it, but at least you're being honest with yourself that you're putting it up on the shelf for whatever reason.
Hmm. And I almost wonder if that's like some part of our true self really calling out to us and saying, here, pay attention. I'm showing up in this kind of ugly way, but I'm trying to get your attention here. And I want you to pay.
For
Let's
sure.
look at this.
For sure.
Hmm. So, what do you think has been the greatest impact in your life now that you've transitioned into this new journey for yourself?
Greatest impact. Oh, gosh. I don't know that there's one particular thing that's been the greatest impact. I would say just over time, really growing to trust and honor myself.
Mm.
Because, as weird as it sounds, like, in that big moment, it was easy to do. But then it's in the smaller moments or in areas that I don't have as much clarity that it takes a lot more doing of, like, okay, I am going to, like, really just own who and what I am and go with it and trust it. So that would be a big thing. And then community. Um, it's not like I have a huge community, but I do have a community of people around me that we all truly want what's best for each other. It's not a competition. It's very much like, you rock it, girl. Go do you, and how can I support you? And that, I think, provides that foundation and the wind under the wings to, like, yeah, go for it. Because even though you're on your own, you're not really on your own. You'll have a safety net down here, even if it's not a literal safety net of like housing or anything like that. Just knowing that you have that emotional support from other people is and continues to be really big.
I think you're touching on such an important piece there too, which is when we're in the exciting part of making a shift or a change, it's all exciting. But there's always those moments where it's going to have its lulls. Not all change is easy. Embarking and launching a new business is not easy. There's going to be those little dips that you experience. And so, how you get through that is with your community and those around you who can be there to lift you up and keep you kind of floating. I think of like hands in a concert where they're just like carrying you along a little
Yeah.
bit.
Well, and I think that also, like you talk about, you have those dips where it's not all easy. I would also say that even if it is exactly what you want it to be, at least for me, I spent my whole life not really living in congruence with who I truly was and what I truly wanted. So once I was, sometimes I would bump up against like, oh, this doesn't feel safe to not be miserable. This doesn't
Mhm.
feel safe to not be sad. And those were actually the harder moments to break free from because it was such an ingrained safety feeling.
I can deeply feel that. I think I think we can understand and relate to that when we self-sabotage in a way and we don't know exactly why it is that we're doing that because we've been living in a certain way and now we're doing something different. And the rest of our body is saying something's not right. It's not normal, quote unquote. So
Mhm.
we need to get back to homeostasis, which isn't healthy for us.
Yeah.
So it's relearning what's healthy.
Yeah. And it's so easy. I mean, I can still catch myself doing it in other areas that I'm growing is that like, oh, I have this sheet full of all of this data, and I'm going to pull out the data that proves why it won't work instead of pulling out the data of why it will work. And yet it's a choice which one you pull out and move from.
Mhm. I know when we had spoken, I don't if you're okay with it, um, of a sign that you had also seen when you were deciding on whether this was the path to do, and it was when you were in the water. I think so. If you're willing
Yeah,
to share.
absolutely. I love telling stories like that. So Allison got a make a wish, and so her wish was to swim with the stingrays, and so we got to do that. We went on a Royal Caribbean cruise because she had seen swimming with the stingrays on one of their commercials. So we did the cruise. We swam with the stingrays. That was like the pinnacle of the trip. And even though she had a trach, so she couldn't actually swim, like she sat in like a little life ring and swished her feet. But anyway, fast forward to I have already sold my house and doing a rental. I've already quit my secure job with retirement and got into contract work. I've already taken all of these steps. I'm on my second and final trip to Kauai where I'm looking at it and going, okay, this isn't just a vacation. This isn't just a scouting trip. If I were living here, how would I feel about this? And had gone through the week and it just was amazing. And so it was the final day, and I was going stand up paddleboarding along like 3 miles a reef with a friend. And he was taking the car up to one place, and I was waiting on the other. And I sat on the beach and I was like, okay, Allison, I'm really thinking about doing this. This is it. Like, I'm leaving the island. Am I coming back and moving here or am I not? Like, just show me. And then I left it. I was just like, I'm just putting it out there. And as we were paddling, I saw this black thing go under my paddleboard and like because the mind does its own thing. I was like, that looks like a crow, but it can't be a crow because I'm in the water. And so I like turned to Brian and I said, I just saw something black go under my paddleboard. What was it? And he's like, oh yeah, I saw it. That's a stingray, which is super cool. Like I've been paddling here for 20 years. I've only seen like 3 or 4 in the 20 years I've been here. Thanks, Allison. Message received. And I will say that I have now, like living there for 10 years, went over to that area and snorkeled all the time. And most of the people I snorkel with have seen a stingray maybe once. I have seen them more than a half dozen times. There
Wow,
was one time that I went down and I saw four of them in one dive, which is just unheard of.
that's so amazing. Well, I love that story. Thank you so much for sharing it. And I think it's important that that we recognize those things and then we hold on and we hear that each other we have those kind of little epiphanies or aha moments or things that are, the universe is telling us this is what we're supposed to do. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think we count it or we can blow it off because we're like, oh no, that can't possibly be happening. But what a clear sign that you received and that you still are one of the few who gets to see them more often than anyone else is incredible.
Yeah, and I think that the thing with signs is like some people believe in them and some don't, and like you do you, whatever way you fall on it. I will say that for myself, when I'm open to it, like I see those synchronicities, and whether it's all in my mind or it's a real thing, when I follow them, I inevitably end up where I'm supposed to be. So,
I mean, I think there's things that we can't possibly explain all the time,
yeah.
but they're important. And it doesn't mean that because we're thinking that they're, that we're crazy, because obviously there's things that point us to it that we can't possibly always understand.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So since you've started Ohana Oasis, it's been 10 years, you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So 10 years. So do you have some moments that you can draw upon that just really has reaffirmed this work for you? I don't know, experiences that you've witnessed or seen, or just how it's changed you.
Yeah. So I think that um, seeing the parents during the retreats when I was actually facilitating, like watching the shifts happen in real time was affirmation. And then actually receiving their evaluation forms that are written later. So it's like once they've gone home and the glow of the retreat is over, and hearing the change. But even more than that, to see them, because I have the luxury of 10 years now, seeing their growth and their taking ownership of their pleasure, their joy, their purpose, and being able to be on the sidelines seeing that over and over. And it can be things from like one mom decided to go back to school and become a teacher. She's now been a teacher for several years and totally credits it to one particular exercise that we did. Um, then the other thing is to really see these alumni that in their purpose is serving other parents, to see them now in leadership and taking over. And the biggest thing for me when it comes to Ohana Oasis is seeing that it doesn't need me there, that there are others that want to take it on, that can take it to a whole nother level. And while the core and the mission and the intention behind it's the same, they can add their own special sauce to it and make it what it's supposed to be moving forward. And that to me, I think is like the biggest joy that I see, um, of all.
Well, and I love that there's idea that you're kind of passing the torch along to them so that they can take this gift that you've provided, and then it kind of continues to grow exponentially because they have their experience with it and they're going to reach people in the way that they do and just the way that you've reached them as well, which is
Yeah.
a beautiful gift that you're providing.
Thank you.
So I'm curious. So, what's next for you? So, if you're passing the torch, I know you kind of mentioned that you're looking into now how you help others, even with creating retreats.
So I actually, right before we got together today, I did a Zoom call with the folks that are curious, like, oh, could I actually do this? So had
Mhm.
my first hour and a half like Q&A and like the basics, and that was amazing and affirming. And so I actually am going to be doing a course starting in January. I'll launch it in January and we'll start at the beginning of February, of like 8 weeks. Like, how do you run a retreat and I'm very clear about the fact that you don't have event plan. You don't need to have event planning experience. You don't have to have certification in anything. You don't have to be an extrovert. In fact, being an introvert is magic.
Mhm.
In facilitating retreats, you don't have to have special hookups. Like, you don't need those things. Here's what you do need. And empowering folks. I mean, kind of like what I did. That's, I think, a through line to what my life purpose is empowering other people to do what's bringing them joy and actually using their gifts. And so that's
Mhm.
what this is going to be, is if you've got the dream for a retreat, you can do it. I'll show you how. And be able to see how they like send their special magic and vision into the world.
I love that. And I think that there are so many people out there who are looking to make an impact in a greater way. And sometimes it does, you just don't know where to go and who to ask and how do you get started on certain things like that. So, where do you think is the best place for them to reach you if they are interested in starting up a retreat and
A couple ways. So I'm on Instagram at Heidi Christina Low. So Heidi and then Christina and then Low. Or my website, which is just my name, HeidiLow.com. Would probably be the best two places. And on my website, you can opt in for something. And right now, I have a couple different ones, but the one that's up there right now is basically taking that story I told about sitting on the patio and envisioning something, and organically it became a retreat. Taking that and have a worksheet of like walking somebody through the process of envisioning what their ideal retreat would look like, and a visualization audio that they can listen to. And so if they opt in and get that, then I've got their email. So they'll be updated. Like, I send out something once a week, just to like what I'm pondering, and like just a little thing. But then as I roll out the course and have stuff available, you'd
Mhm.
hear about it.
Okay, so HeidiLow.com.
Yep.
And then also it's
Ohana Oasis. Yep. So
OhanaOasis.com as
that's
well.
no, that's .org, because
Oh,
it's a
sorry,
nonprofit.
.org.
So that's OHANA and then Oasis .org. And that's where you can look and see everything that's available, and click to apply, because we do have, and I would say, like, even if you're not ready to go on a retreat now, put in your application, because we have a waiting list. And so, and it's by invitation only. We only do 4 couples or 4 singles at a time. So get your application in so that you can be considered for the next retreat.
Okay. Well, on that note, in terms of like people who've experienced the grief that you've gone through and similar types of, just emotional trauma, what's a message that you would have for them?
I would say, if you're in the middle of the grief, be in the middle of the grief. Feel it, don't avoid it. You can shove it down, you can try to walk around it, but the only time you're actually going to be free of it is if you go through it and you embrace it. Um, and know that if you actually truly feel it, you will move through it quicker. It's the delaying of it and avoiding of it that causes a lot more pain than the actually feeling it. And I would say, beyond that, to find the thing that brings you hope, that brings you a reason to move forward, and that it's not an external thing, like just showing up for your kids or whatever. Like, for me, when Allison was diagnosed, um, I realized I hadn't gone to college yet. I was like, I know that I'm a college graduate. I just haven't gone and gotten the degree yet. I have to do this for myself. And so enrolled in one course at a time and took one class and did the homework while I was at chemotherapy with Allison. And I had a lot of people judge me for that. A lot of
Mm.
people say, why are you focusing on that? Shouldn't you be giving all your time to Allison? And I was so clear on the fact that, nope, I need something that is forward thinking and hopeful and is just for me to be able to show up for her. And I think that that's anything that you're going through. You need to find the thing that's going to provide you some light and some hope and some forward momentum, even in the midst of all of the chaos and gunk you're going through.
Oh, I love how you shared that sometimes we do need something for us so that we can then show up in the capacities where we're needed in other areas. And that's true for all of life, right? In the sense
For
that because if
sure.
we were supposed to be good as as a spouse, as a mother, as a in our careers, we have to find other things that can help to give us that light at the end of the tunnel. Otherwise, it is overwhelming and you're just drowning under the rest of it.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you hear people say it all the time, but it is, I am living proof and have seen it over and over again, and it's true that, like, if your tank is empty, your car ain't going anywhere and you can't help anybody. And you might only need a little bit in your tank, but then you only have that much capacity. If
Hmm.
you fill up your tank and you top off your tank every day, when shit hits the fan, you have that much capacity to go through before you need to refill. But if you're
Hmm.
always running here and something happens, you're stuck and all of a sudden you're in a deficit, and it's a lot harder to get out of a deficit than just to fill and top off.
Absolutely. So, one thought, then, one kind of final question is
Yeah.
for those who are experiencing this need to then do something else with their life, kind of make this leap or jump or just act out on courage, would you have any advice for them?
I would say to get really truly quiet with yourself and give yourself the space and the time and the patience to listen and trust that it might not come right away. Um, because, like I said, I started like really pushing and forcing it at like years 4 and 5. And it was once I let it go and just trusted it would come and created that space for it that it came. But then when that brilliant moment comes, and it might not even be a brilliant moment, it might be just like one little baby step. When that glimmer comes, take action while you're in that glimmer and then see what happens. Because if you don't take action in that glimmer, you're going to talk yourself out of it, or at least I would. But once you take action in that glimmer, then you see what happens and it takes you down the road to the next thing. And don't be intimidated by the big, huge thing that seems crazy, because it may evolve and it may not. And you may end up with the resources and the ability to do it. And don't let a significant other or anything else stop you either, because you might have kept it to yourself and they may have had something similar. And I've seen this happen in retreats with parents. We have an exercise where they go do it on their own and they're scared to talk to each other. And then it turns out they actually had similar visions that they could pair
Mm.
together.
Mm. That's really good insight there. I think that's true. Sometimes we are afraid to share it or vocalize what's living inside of us, and we fear that judgment that might come. And I love what you've said about the partners because then they're coming together and they have very similar shared visions for their lives. And if they had never done that, then they would never know.
It's true. And I will say on the point, about the judgment that might come, oh my gosh, when I told people that I was quitting my very good job as a VP in a public affairs firm with a retirement plan and all of that, and I was going to go move 3,000 miles away and start a nonprofit with the retirement I'd pulled out, you can imagine my dad in particular was like, "Are you effing kidding me, Heidi? Have you lost it?" And yet now he's the one that's like, "Oh, my daughter does this, and look at my daughter." It's like, mm. So have the faith in yourself and don't rely on other people to have the faith in you, because they might
Mm.
not.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you're doing something daring that's moving away from what the norm is, what everyone tells us that's what the path that we're supposed to follow, and that's the safe path.
Yeah,
But when you know that you have this life to live and there's something more that's inside calling to you, sometimes it is stepping out on that faith.
it is. And there were also a lot of people that weren't, I would say most, like some of them were close to me, but a lot that like their their concern for me wasn't tied up in it. So people that were kind of on the periphery, like it inspired them to go do things. Like I
Mm.
know more than one person that quit a job and moved into something different. Cause like, whoa, if you can do it, I can too. So when you take bold action, there are going to be the people that counterbalance the naysayers because
Which
people want
must
permission to do it.
Yeah, they need that permission, and that must feel really good too, knowing that you helped inspire someone else too to follow through on some of that calling that they've been having, and they just had to have that extra push of bravery or
Absolutely.
example that you set forth.
Yeah. It wasn't my intention, but it sure did. Yeah, it feels good when I hear that for sure.
Mhm. Well, so people can come and get in touch with you again. We'll put all of this to the thread and everything, but HeidiLow.com is probably the best place to
Probably,
get in
yeah.
touch with you.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so thankful to have you on today. I so appreciate you sharing with us, everything that all the wisdom that you have gained and gleaned, and being willing to open up about that. Do you have any last thoughts that you might share with our audience today?
I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. And you asked like all the right questions to get, I think you got every little piece of wisdom I got by the questions that you asked. So um, I guess I would just leave everybody with trust in the dreams that are like deep inside you and get curious about them and see if you can follow them.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing all of the wonderful things that you've got going on in the future. And we will share all of your information in the posts that follow with the podcast.
Thank you. It's
All right. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure to have you on today.
been a pleasure to see you too.
All right.